Hey VC, Jamie here. Hope you guys are all doing well. Any new subs, welcome. I hope I can share some interesting new stuff with you. Thanks, Sure, for pointing people my way. And I'm glad you enjoyed the VCLT as well. I figured, having watched your channel for the last 6 to 9 months, that was probably something that was right up your street. So yeah, I'm glad you dug it. As I say in my message to you in the package, it's one of my albums of the year so far. Yeah, it's a great record. So as I say, glad you enjoyed it. I wanted to kick this off really with a little bit of a mention for the great tenor saxophonist Steve Grossman, who I learned passed away just at the weekend. He was just 70 years old, and he was a great post-Coltrane tenor saxophonist who was, to all intents and purposes, an absolute child prodigy. Joined Miles Davis's band at the age of 18. He replaced Wayne Shorter, which, if you can imagine, I mean, the size of the boots to fill there. And he stepped straight in the studio recording. He was on Jack Johnson. He played on the Big Fun records. The first album I heard him on was this one, which is Miles's Black Beauty, live at Fillmore West. And this is, yeah, that period just after Bitches Brew. Incredibly loud electronics. You got Chick Corea on the Fender Rhodes with Echoplex and ring modulator and all these crazy effects. You've got Dave Holland on bass, amplified electric bass. Dejonet just absolutely crushing the drum kit, and Airto on percussion. And then in amongst that, you've got Grossman on soprano, who, to me, in amongst it all, kind of gets a little bit lost. He was relegated to playing the soprano pretty much entirely on every official release there was with Miles, even though tenor was his sort of lead instrument. And yeah, as I say, to me he got a little bit lost in these recordings, and I think he got a bit of a bad rep early on because these didn't really do him any justice. But when you hear him 2-3 years later on this record here, which is in Elvin Jones's band. This is Live at the Lighthouse. It was recorded for Blue Note in 1973. There's a much more there's an assurance to his playing. The harmonic language has developed much more, and I think crucially, you know, here it's Grossman and Dave Liebman, who was his real compatriot at the time. They were both white Jewish New Yorkers who were mixing it with the greatest black musicians of the period. It's two of them, Gene Perla on bass and Elvin Jones on drums, and what you have with this is space. So much space for these guys to experiment, stretch out, push the language. They're in dialogue with one another. They dovetail beautifully with each other. It's both saxophones. You sometimes got tenor and soprano, or tenor and flute, or 2 sopranos. Yeah, it's a double LP this, and it's got great playing, particularly from Grossman. Actually, I think he's brilliant. To me, though, at his best are the records that he put out for the Canadian PM label. There's obviously Terra Firma behind me, and Stone Alliance, which was a band that he had with Don Elias, and also with Gene Perla on bass, who was in the Elvin Jones group as well. And then this one, which was his debut record for PM, which is the one I've probably been playing the most the last 24 hours or so. So this is Sun Shapes to Come, and yeah, it's Gene Perla, Don Elias, and Jan Hammer, who's on Fender Rhodes and Moog Synth as well. And yeah, what I find with Grossman, kind of re-listening to these again, there's the assurance that you find on the Elvin Jones records. But, I mean, like, there's no other fusion records to me that sound quite like these. Well, first of all, the recording quality isn't great, so what you get is this kind of lo-fi, kind of aggressive, almost like garage rock sound to it. I don't really know how else to describe it. But also, like, Grossman's playing on this is like white hot. He's got this kind of arrogance and swagger and confidence, and just these kind of flurry of ideas and notes, and it's all supported underneath by this churning, funky groove. Don Elias on the kit, there's percussion, I assume overdubbed in there as well, and then Jan Hammer on the Fender Rhodes and the Moog as well. Harissa, Zulu Stomp, so amazing drum break at the beginning, and Sixth Sense as well. Those 3 tracks are all absolutely killer. So Steve Grossman, a wonderful musician, and I think a big loss to the music. So I wanted to start off with a bit of a mention for him, because I've been playing a lot of his records the last 24 hours. A little bit more 70s stuff this week. This is the band The Awakening. This is their debut record on Black Jazz. This is Hear, Sense and Feel. Now these guys were the only band that were signed to the Black Jazz label. Pretty much every other record that was put out on the label other than by them is a solo artist plus session musicians. And it's a really interesting blend, this band. You've got, on the one hand, a couple of musicians who were members of Chicago's AACM movement, so they play with the likes of Roscoe Mitchell and Michael Richard Abrams and Anthony Braxton as well. And then there are also a group of musicians who are more in the sort of soul jazz movement of the period in Chicago as well. They're all Chicago musicians. And so what you get on this record is this amazing blend of experimentation and groove. Tracks like, Prologue, Spring Thing, starts with a sort of spoken word incantation, and these sort of swells of horns, and then opens out into this acoustic post-bop sort of dancing melody and feel to it. Kerr's Dance is just really funky, great Fender Rhodes work on that. When Will It Ever End, which I find to be a really affecting piece of music that, as far as I'm aware, it's sort of dedicated to the ongoing struggles of African Americans at the time, and that notion of it being that constant push uphill over and over again. And there's no words, there's no lyrics on it, but you can feel that struggle and that pushing within it, and that sense of weariness but endurance. I don't really know how else to describe that, but this is a fantastic record. I also played their follow-up record this week too, Mirage. For me, this has got 2 great tracks on it. Mode for Didi, which starts the album, which super funky, really infectious groove on it, and then Mirage, which is this sort of Afro Eastern infused, sort of Eastern infused Latin feel. Again, like I said, it's a killer track. Overall, I would say this is probably, for me, the weaker of the 2 records. It's still great. I mean, I love the band. I love that. In general, I'm a real sucker for anything that's got Fender Rhodes on it and has a sort of electro-acoustic bent to it, which both of these are. I'd say this has probably got more of a funk emphasis on it, and their debut record is maybe more of a bit more of a straight-ahead jazz record. Both great nonetheless. The debut, I think, is about to be reissued as well on Real Gum, so should be easier to track down. Okay, here's one. This is by the drummer Matt Marucci, who was from New York, and this is a 1982 live record of his, which is called Extensity, which was recorded live at the Carmelo's Jazz Supper Club. Again, this is that sort of post-bop language. He describes Extensity was a word I'd never heard of. I assume he made it up, I don't know, but he describes it as a fusion of the kinetic extension of what has gone before and intense extending, expanding, or stretching. And there is a real elasticity to the musicianship on this. Both saxophonists absolutely kill it with the solos. I find Dedication, which is the second track especially, to be probably the standout piece, and Lou Matthews as well, who's the pianist. It's definitely got a McCoy Tyner vibe, heavy use of left hand. But yeah, this is one of these albums. I think it's super cheap. It's probably not that easy to find, but no one's really looking for it. But it's full of great music, and it sounds like a live record. And when I'm listening to live records, I want them to sound live. You know, there's an energy, there's a dynamism, there's, you know, they don't edit out the audience applause. You feel like you're sat in the room. And yeah, when I hear a live record, that's what I'm looking for, and this is a great example of that. Sticking with live records, here's another one, late 70s, early 1980s, drummer Roy Haynes, live at the Riverbop. This was recorded in France. Was it in Paris? I think it was Paris. We'll say it's Paris. The label's certainly based in Paris. It's a Blue Mirage label, recorded right at the end of 1979, released in 1980. And yeah, again, sounds really live. The drums on this are recorded incredibly. It's like the punchiest, most thunderous sound I've ever heard from Roy Haynes. Incredible up-tempo version of Footprints. There's no piano in this, so it's drums, bass, guitar, and saxophone. And yeah, the version of Footprints is just driving. Haynes is all over the kit as usual. But there's also, I think my favourite track is his cover of Freddie Hubbard's Little Sunflower, which has, besides an amazing drum solo, has a drum pattern that Haynes plays. I mean, he's known as Snap, Crackle and Pop because he's got that kind of dancing, lively, active, always shifting, moving sound. You know, you think of things like Now He Sings, Now He Sobs with Chick Corea. That's what I think of when I think of Roy Haynes. But on this cover of Little Sunflower, he gets into this drum pattern that basically just becomes a vamp, and the track is, what's like 14 and a half minutes long, and he sticks in that one pattern for probably about 10 minutes, and not for a second do you get bored of it. It has this almost hypnotic effect to it. You just get right in the zone, right in the groove, and yeah, when it gets to his drum solo, yeah, it's brilliant, and it sounds fantastic. And a special mention as well for the guitarist, Marcus Fiorillo, who I haven't heard of before, but his playing on this is terrific. So again, this one's not expensive. It's a really cheap record. I don't know how easy it is to find in the US, but it can be had in Europe pretty easily. Roy Haynes live at the Riverbop. Okay, so I think last time I shared a Polish jazz record, and I have been kind of looking around for a bit more Polish jazz, and I messaged Tom, FXP, who is, you know, the Polish jazz man around here, and he gave me some pointers for some records. One that he mentioned, which I did have, which I hadn't listened to in a while, was this one, which is the violinist Michal Urbaniak. This is his group Constellation, which featured his wife at the time, Ursula Dudziak, on vocals. So this is a live record, again, bit of a theme developing here. This was called In Concert, recorded on the Polskie Nagrania label, 1973. And yeah, man, this is wild. It's not jazz, it's not, I mean, fusion is like a lazy term for something like this. There's a bit of krautrock, experimental rock, there's electronics, there's folk, there's all sorts in this. I mean, if there's one track to hear, it's the opener, which is definitely on YouTube, which I urge you to check out. It's Bengal, 17 and a half minutes, and it is this blend of, you've got Urbaniak's amazing violin playing, sort of churning drone of the band, there's Hammond organ, drums, Fender Rhodes and bass all mixing together in this rolling sort of soup. And then you have Ursula Dudziak, who had this technique of wordless vocals, so she would sort of sing along with the melody and accompany Urbaniak's violin. But then she also had these electronic effects that she would pass her vocals through, so you get these delays and reverb, and the sound sort of bounces around, and she's in sort of duet with herself, and also underscores the music at the same time with a drum machine for texture. and yeah, I mean, you'll never have heard anything quite like this. I don't think it's got more in common with krautrock to me than any kind of jazz. But it's killer. I love it. So yeah, highly recommended. Michal Urbaniak, Constellation. And I'm not sure how long I've been going now, but I'll probably call it there. I have a few more. I'll show one more. Yeah, so finished with this one. This is an Italian record by Gaetano Liguori, which I hope I've pronounced correctly, but I probably haven't. This is his group, the Idea Trio, and this is entitled Chile Libero, Chile Rosso, Free Chile, Red Chile. This is the debut record that this group put out, and Liguori reportedly wanted to use the platform of his music and his compositions to spread political ideas. He saw his band as being a political band, not just a sort of aesthetic improvisational group. So he was one of the first Italian musicians to really aggressively pursue alternative performance spaces. So rather than just using conventional concert halls or bars and clubs, he would look for warehouse spaces, he would look for factories, schools, universities, all in a bid to try and spread the message within his music to the masses. And his idea was that it would spread sort of revolutionary ideas to people throughout the Italian population. So all of the compositions on this album and on the follow-up album that this band did were inspired. He wrote them off the back of contemporary events that he had seen on the news. So you've got pieces on here like Ballad for a Murdered Student, Referendum, and then a 4-movement piece at the end called Free Chile, Red Chile. And yeah, this isn't again, this is not easy listening at all. It's pretty much a free jazz record. There's only a couple of tracks really that don't dissolve into complete freeform improvisation. The instrumentation on here is it's piano, bass, and drums, but the bass, which is Roberto Del Piano, not aptly named in this case, he's actually on electric bass. It does make a really, really big difference to the sound. That there's just a bit more of a kind of bottom end weight to it than you would find with an acoustic bass, I think. And when he does go wandering up into the upper register, it really, really sings as well. But yeah, as I say, it's not an easy listening record at all, but it's got this real vivacious energy to it, which I find just really, really exciting to listen to. Yeah, I mean, the Free Chile, Red Chile 4 movements is a proper challenge. It's about 20 minutes long, and it's all free improv, but there's one piece in Via Ludovico Il Moro, which is just a beautiful modal waltz, and yeah, his piano style is, I mean, it's not quite Cecil Taylor, but there's definitely a big Cecil Taylor influence to that sort of cascades of sound. They sound slightly classical, very percussive, and yeah, it's a beautiful piece. Again, I don't know how easy this is to find in the US, but I love Italian jazz, and this is a great example of it. So yeah, I guess that'll do it for this week. Thanks for watching if you made it this far, and I'll be back soon. Not sure when, but I'll be back soon with some more stuff that I've been listening to share with you guys. So yeah, until then, take care. Yeah, I'll catch you next time. Cheers.